do not need money to become rich. You need a pattern already inside you. Some people have it. Most people don't. You have felt it before. A restlessness, a refusal to settle. That feeling is not random. It is the first sign. 11 signs. You already know which ones are yours. Let's find out. Machiavelli spent very little time cataloguing a prince's treasury when assessing whether that prince would still hold power a decade later, and he never judged a prince by the size of his treasury on the day they met. He judged him by his temperament, because temperament, not treasury, was what actually predicted whether a small kingdom would grow into a large one or a large one would quietly collapse into nothing. Wealth follows the exact same rule today, whether or not anyone in finance ever bothers to say so plainly. The number in your account right now tells you almost nothing about where you will end up. The pattern underneath your daily decisions tells you almost everything, whether or not you have ever consciously named the pattern to yourself. This is not a list of habits to adopt starting Monday, a checklist to complete once and forget about, or a personality test with a final score at the end. Habits can be faked for a week and abandoned by the second, performed convincingly for an audience without ever actually taking hold underneath. What follows are 11 traits that are far harder to fake because they show up in how you actually react when nobody is grading you for it. Some of these signs will already feel familiar, uncomfortably so. Others will feel like a stranger's description of somebody else entirely, a person you do not currently recognize as yourself at all. Pay the closest attention of all to the specific ones that make you flinch involuntarily. That flinch is usually the most honest data point in the entire video, more reliable than any answer you would give if asked directly, since the flinch arrives before you have had time to decide how the answer should make you look. 11 signs. Even a handful of them, genuinely present, outweighs a bank balance that currently says nothing at all. This list is deliberately not ranked in order of importance, since the 11 signs interact with each other far more than they operate alone, and a person genuinely strong in 3 or 4 of them will often find the remaining ones easier to develop than expected. Sign 1. You get restless before you get comfortable. Most people chase comfort and relax the moment they find it. You feel comfort differently. The moment a situation stops demanding anything new from you, it starts to feel less like safety and more like a slow, quiet trap closing around you. Picture 2 employees who each land the exact same stable, well-paying job. One settles in immediately, relieved, and stays in that same comfortable role for the next 15 years without much complaint. The other feels genuinely uneasy within 18 months, not because the job got worse, but because it stopped changing while he didn't. The first employee retires exactly where he started, adjusted only for inflation. The second has already moved through 3 increasingly demanding roles by the time the first one gets his 15-year certificate. This restlessness is often mistaken for dissatisfaction, even by the person feeling it. It is closer to an internal alarm that goes off the moment growth quietly stops, whether or not the paycheck notices yet. Comfort was never the finish line for you. It was always just the signal that it's time to move again. Notice this the next time a role, a relationship, or a routine finally stops asking anything new of you and the discomfort arrives anyway, uninvited. That discomfort is not ingratitude for what you have built. It is simply the same alarm going off again, on schedule, exactly as it always has. This is worth distinguishing clearly from simple boredom, which chases novelty for its own suck, regardless of whether the novelty actually leads anywhere useful. What is being described here is narrower, a specific alarm that fires only once genuine growth has stopped, not merely once routine has set in. Confusing the two leads to chasing change constantly instead of only when change is actually warranted, which is its own, quieter way of never building anything that lasts. The practical test worth applying honestly is asking whether the discomfort you feel is pointed at the situation itself or simply at the unfamiliarity of staying somewhere long enough to see it through. Those two discomforts feel almost identical from the inside and produce completely opposite advice about what to actually do next. Sign 2. You already treat money as a tool, not a reward. Most people experience money primarily as a prize, something to be earned and then enjoyed as proof the earning was worth it. You experience it differently, closer to a tool sitting in a drawer waiting for the right job, more interesting for what it can build than for what it can buy you personally. Two people receive an identical unexpected bonus on the same afternoon. One immediately mentally spends it on something that will make the bonus feel real and earned: a trip, a purchase, a small personal reward. The other immediately starts calculating what that same amount could become if pointed at something productive instead. The first person's bonus is a pleasant memory within a month. The second person's bonus is still working, quietly, a year later. This is not the same as depriving yourself of every reward forever. It is a difference in the very first instinct money triggers in you, reward or raw material, and that first instinct shapes everything that happens to the money afterward. You can test this in yourself honestly by noticing the very first thought that arrives after an unexpected windfall, before you have time to perform an answer for anyone else. Whichever instinct fires first, spend or deploy, is usually the real one, regardless of which answer you would give out loud if someone asked. This instinct is rarely taught directly, since most financial advice focuses on what to do with money after the decision has already been made rather than on the split-second reflex that decides the category in the first place. By the time a formal plan is consulted, the money has often already been mentally assigned, and the plan is simply catching up to a decision that happened instantly and invisibly, long before any spreadsheet was ever opened. Watching this instinct in others is often easier than watching it in yourself, since the pattern is usually obvious across an entire lifetime of small decisions once you know to look for it, even in someone who has never once described their own relationship with money out loud. Sign 3. You ask before you feel ready. Most people wait for a feeling of readiness before making a request, a pitch, or an ask, and that feeling frequently never actually arrives on schedule. You have a different relationship with readiness. You have learned, sometimes the hard way, that waiting to feel ready is often just a more comfortable name for delay. Two founders each need to ask a difficult investor for a meeting. One rehearses for weeks, waiting to feel fully prepared before finally reaching out, by which point the investor's attention has moved elsewhere. The other reaches out while still visibly unpolished, accepting that the ask itself will always feel slightly premature. The first founder's perfect pitch never gets delivered to anyone. The second founder's imperfect pitch gets delivered dozens of times, and a fraction of those dozens is where the actual opportunity was always hiding. Readiness is a feeling, not a fact, and you have already noticed that the feeling rarely arrives before the deadline that actually matters. This is not recklessness dressed up as courage. It is simply a more accurate accounting of what waiting actually costs, measured against a feeling of readiness that was never going to arrive on its own, regardless of how long you gave it to show up. There is a specific version of this worth naming directly, the polished version of an ask that never gets sent because one more round of refinement always seems worth doing first. The imperfect version sent today reliably outperforms the perfect version still being drafted next month, since only one of the two versions can actually be answered, considered, or acted upon by anyone else. This does not mean every ask should be rushed out carelessly, since a genuinely sloppy request can close a door as effectively as never asking at all. The standard being described is good enough, sent on time, not flawless, sent late, which is a narrower and more useful bar than it first appears. Sign 4. You see value before anyone points it out. Most people need consensus before they trust that something is valuable, waiting for enough other people to agree first. You notice value earlier than that, sometimes uncomfortably early, before the crowd has caught up to confirm your own read was correct. Two people encounter the same overlooked opportunity, undervalued and unfashionable at the time. One dismisses it precisely because nobody else seems interested yet, treating the silence as evidence there is nothing there. The other invests real attention specifically because nobody else seems interested yet, treating the silence as an opening rather than a warning. Years later, once the crowd finally arrives and agrees loudly that the opportunity was obviously good all along, the first person is still waiting for permission on the next one. The second person is already 3 opportunities ahead, having never needed the crowd's approval in the first place. This is uncomfortable precisely because it requires tolerating real, sustained disagreement with people whose judgment you otherwise respect. The crowd is not always wrong when it is silent. It is only unreliable as a timing signal, and timing is usually where the actual advantage was hiding all along. This sign is also frequently mistaken for stubbornness by people who share a room with it, since defending an unpopular red before it is validated looks, from the outside, indistinguishable from simple contrarianism. The actual difference only becomes visible in hindsight, once one contrarian red after another quietly turns out to have been early rather than wrong, a pattern that only reveals itself across years, never across a single instance. The uncomfortable middle stretch, after the disagreement starts and before the vindication arrives, is where most people quietly abandon a genuinely correct red, simply because sustained disagreement is exhausting to hold alone for long enough to be proven right. Sign 5. You would rather be wrong fast than right slow. Most people delay a decision specifically to avoid the discomfort of being visibly wrong, treating a slow, deliberate mistake as somehow more acceptable than a fast, obvious one. You would rather find out quickly, even if finding out means an uncomfortable, immediate correction in front of other people. 2 traders each take a position based on incomplete information, aware the picture might be wrong. One holds the position rigidly for months, unwilling to admit the read was flawed, watching the loss grow slowly and quietly. The other exits within days once the evidence turns, absorbing a small, fast, visible loss instead. The slow trader's mistake costs him a fortune stretched painfully across months. The fast trader's mistake costs him lunch money and a lesson he can actually use again tomorrow. Speed of correction, not the absence of mistakes, is what actually separates these 2 outcomes, and you already instinctively favor the correction that arrives fast and cheap over the one that arrives slow and expensive. This is genuinely hard to practice, since every instinct in a person facing a mistake pushes toward defending the original position rather than abandoning it quickly. The people who master this are not less attached to being right. They are simply more attached to finding out the truth quickly than to protecting their own ego for a few extra weeks. The visible cost of this sign is real and worth naming honestly. Being wrong quickly, in front of other people, stings in a way that being wrong slowly and privately does not. The trade being made is a small, immediate, public discomfort in exchange for a much larger private cost avoided later. And most people, understandably, choose to avoid the visible sting instead, even when the private cost would ultimately be far worse. Reframing the sting itself helps more than most people expect. A fast, visible correction is not evidence of failure. It is evidence that the feedback loop is actually working, catching an error while it is still small enough to fix cheaply, which is precisely the outcome a slower, more private process usually fails to produce. Sign 6. You already guard your time like it is money. Most people protect their money carefully while treating their time as an infinite, replaceable resource, available to be spent carelessly on anything that asks for it. You already sense, even if nobody has said it to you directly, that time is the one resource that never comes back once it is spent. 2 equally busy people are asked for an hour of unpaid, low-value favor work by an acquaintance. One says yes automatically, uncomfortable with the idea of guarding an hour that carefully. The other declines politely, protecting that hour the same way he would protect a locked drawer of cash. A year of these small decisions, repeated weekly, produces a genuinely different amount of reclaimed time between the 2. Time the second person quietly reinvests into something that actually compounds. This does not mean becoming ungenerous or transactional with every minute of your day. It means noticing that an hour given away carelessly, over and over, is functionally identical to money given away carelessly, over and over, even though only one of the 2 ever shows up on a bank statement. This sign becomes easiest to spot in exactly the moments it is hardest to apply. Favors asked by people who would never dream of asking to simply borrow money instead. The social cost of declining a small favor feels larger in the moment than the actual hour being protected, which is precisely why most people trade the hour away without ever noticing the trade happened at all, let alone tallying its true cost across a full year. A useful habit here is treating an hour of favor time the same way a careful spender treats an impulse purchase. Not refusing it automatically, but pausing long enough to notice the request has been made before agreeing to it out of pure social reflex. Sign 7. You do not need applause to keep going. Most people's motivation quietly depends on visible recognition, and that motivation noticeably sags whenever the recognition stops arriving on schedule. You keep moving through the exact stretches where nobody is watching or clapping, because the work itself, not the applause around it, was always the actual engine. Two craftsmen work equally hard during a long stretch where nobody notices either of them. One slowly loses momentum, demoralized by the silence, and quietly scales back his effort to match the attention he is actually receiving. The other keeps the same standard regardless, treating the silence as irrelevant to the quality of the work itself. When recognition finally does arrive, unpredictably, months later, it finds the second craftsman with a body of work the first one never finished building. This is the quiet difference between a hobby and a discipline. A hobby needs an audience to stay motivating. A discipline survives the audience leaving the room entirely, and it is usually the discipline, not the hobby, that eventually produces something worth being recognized for. This is not the same as working in complete isolation forever, since feedback from the right sources still matters enormously to genuinely improving. It is a claim about where the motivation itself originates, from the work's own standard rather than from an audience's reaction to it, which is the only version of motivation reliable enough to survive the long stretches when no audience is paying attention at all. Sign 8. You treat every skill as a door, not a destination. Most people master a skill and then settle inside it, treating mastery itself as the finish line worth protecting. You treat every mastered skill as a door that leads somewhere else, useful mainly for what it now allows you to attempt next. Two skilled tradesmen reach genuine mastery of the same craft at roughly the same age. One settles comfortably into being the best in the room, content to repeat that mastery for the rest of his career. The other immediately starts using that same mastery as leverage into an adjacent, larger opportunity the first tradesman never even considers reachable. A decade later, the first tradesman is still, technically, the best in a room that hasn't grown. The second tradesman is standing in an entirely different, much larger room he built a door into himself. This is not restlessness for its own sake, and it is not an argument against ever getting good at anything. It is a refusal to let mastery become a ceiling simply because it once felt, understandably, like an achievement worth resting inside for a while. The discomfort here is specific and easy to underestimate, leaving behind the identity of being the acknowledged best at something in exchange for being, once again, a relative beginner somewhere new. Most people who have worked hard to earn that first identity are reluctant to trade it for the discomfort of starting over, even when starting over is exactly what reaching the next level actually requires of them. Sign 9. Comfort bores you faster than it bores others. Most people can tolerate a comfortable plateau for years without much complaint, genuinely content with a stable, unchanging routine. You reach the edge of your own tolerance for that same plateau much sooner, restless long, before anyone around you even notices anything has changed. Two colleagues settle into equally comfortable, unchanging roles at the same company. One remains content there for a full decade, genuinely satisfied with the stability. The other grows visibly restless within 2 years, not from ingratitude, but because the absence of new demands starts to feel, to him specifically, like quiet decay rather than peace. That restlessness, uncomfortable as it is to sit with, is usually the exact thing that eventually moves him somewhere the patient colleague never reaches. This sign is easy to mistake for simple impatience or ingratitude, and people who have it are frequently told exactly that by others who don't share it. The difference only becomes visible years later, once the restlessness has quietly compounded into distance nobody predicted at the time. This sign is worth distinguishing from simple dissatisfaction with the people or company involved, which is a different problem entirely and calls for a different response. What is being described here is a dissatisfaction with a rate of change that has slowed to zero, present even in situations that are otherwise perfectly pleasant, well compensated, and genuinely free of any other complaint worth naming. Sign 10. You already think in decades, not paychecks. Most people's planning horizon rarely extends past the next paycheck, the next month, the next visible milestone directly in front of them. You already, at least some of the time, catch yourself thinking in a much longer unit, decades rather than months, when weighing a decision that looks small today. Two young professionals each choose between a slightly higher salary now and a slower paying path with much larger, long-term upside. One takes the higher salary, reasoning correctly that a paycheck today is worth more certainty than a maybe later. The other takes the slower path, reasoning that a decade from now will not remember or care about this particular month's difference. A decade later, exactly as the second one predicted, nobody involved remembers or cares about that early month's gap, only about which path actually compounded. This is not a claim that short-term needs never matter, since a person genuinely struggling today cannot reasonably ignore today to serve a decade they may not survive to see. It is a claim that once basic needs are actually covered, the decade-length lens keeps making itself useful in decisions that feel, wrongly, like they only concern this month. This lens is easiest to apply retroactively and hardest to apply in the actual moment a decision is being made, since the decade-length consequence of any single month's choice is, by definition, invisible until most of the decade has already quietly passed. The discipline is trusting the lens before it has had the chance to prove itself even once on the strength of pattern alone. Sign 11. You would rather own a small piece than rent a big one. Most people prefer the appearance of more, a bigger rented apartment, a nicer leased car, over the substance of less that is actually owned outright. You would rather hold a small, genuine stake in something real than a large, comfortable illusion of something you don't actually control. Two people with identical modest savings make very different choices with them. One rents a lifestyle that looks, from the outside, considerably more impressive than his actual financial position. The other buys a small, unglamorous stake in something productive, one that looks like less from the outside but is quietly, actually his. 10 years later, the appearance has cost the first person everything he put into it, replaced with nothing but memories. The small, genuine stake has grown into something the second person actually owns free and clear. This is the hardest sign for most people to actually apply, because the rented appearance is immediately visible to everyone watching, while the small, genuine stake looks, for years, like nothing worth mentioning to anyone at all. This sign also explains why genuine wealth so often looks, from the outside, less impressive than the appearance of it, since ownership tends to be quiet by nature, while rented appearance is specifically built to be seen and admired. Judging anyone's actual position by how it looks at a glance is, for exactly this reason, one of the least reliable measurements available to you. 11 signs. None of them require a single dollar you don't already have. All 11 live in how you already react, quietly, when nobody is watching closely enough to score you for it. Go back through this list honestly. Do this slowly, one sign at a time, resisting the urge to skim toward a comfortable overall score. Count how many of these 11 you actually recognized in yourself. Not the ones that sounded flattering, but the ones that made you flinch with recognition before you had time to decide how to feel about it. That count is a far more honest predictor of where you are headed than anything currently sitting in your bank account, and it is the one number on this entire list genuinely worth checking back on honestly a full year from now. If this changed the way you see your own instincts, then don't stop here, because what you've heard in this video is only the surface. There are deeper layers to psychology, influence, and wealth that simply can't be explored fully in one video. Not because they don't exist, but because most people aren't ready to hear them. That's why most stay average. If you're not one of them, then subscribe, because every video here is designed to sharpen your mindset, increase your value, and separate you from the crowd. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Most people will watch this and move on. A few will stay and change. Decide, right now, honestly and without flattering yourself, which one you actually are.